Welcome to Advice No One Asked For. This is how Stranger Things 5 should have gone. We're going to start off with throwing out the entire season. It was atrocious.
What the heck are they doing ending season 4 on a hype-building cliffhanger of Hawkins getting split open implying Vecna's already going to be here, and then start season 5 with, oh yeah, that was nothing. We're going to go play hide and seek now. That's like Halo 3 starting with, finish the fight. We did that months ago. Let's go on an Arbiter scavenger hunt. I hear he's good now. We're throwing it out and starting the way it was promised. But hold on, real quick. When I say promised, it's important to know that there's general rules of writing that make good writing. One of them is fulfilling promises. If you have a bomb on screen for a certain amount of time and then move away, you're promising that that bomb is going to come into play eventually. Pick any stellar story and there are promises made and promises kept. So quickly, let's point out the two biggest promises made by Stranger Things before season 5. 11 is used by people for her powers and has no family. Throughout the show, Mike and the party see her not for her powers, but for who she is, showing us that she's more than her powers. This is promised and fulfilled every season, reinforcing the idea and turning it into a central character theme of the show, that people are more than what's on the surface. And then number 2, every concept in the show is a spin on something related to Dungeons and Dragons. Demogorgon to the Flowerheads, Mind Flayer to the Hive Mind Mist stuff, Vecna to Henry. The Upside Down is the Shadow Realm. All of it is promised and fulfilled throughout the show to be a one-to-one to D&D, albeit with a few aesthetic twists. This is also promised and fulfilled every season, reinforcing it into the core environmental theme of the show. So with all this context, episode 1. We open at the end of season 4 with Vecna coming out of the center, mangled and charred. I like the idea of him becoming more warped, but the party just messed him up. And for someone whose main tactic is fear, he would lean into the grotesque effects of being burned alive. Being burned completely through, his eyelids would melt away along with his eyeballs. So he comes out into Hawkins and got what he wanted, sure. But there's a cost that now he looks like the victims he used to achieve the goal. Given Vecna's power, however, this just makes him more connected to his powers, so he can use the power to see in some ways better than he used to. So everyone tries to fight him immediately and they get absolutely smacked around. They escape because he can't see and he still hasn't figured out perfectly how to see with the power yet. But they escape and go into hiding to lick their wounds and come up with a plan as tendrils and demogorgons come through the cracks to take over the city. Vecna's army of demogorgons abducts people and throws them into a place all so that they can reconstruct the Mind Flayer. And I'm going to keep the Mind Flayer a pet of Vecna. Making it ultimately the bad guy rejects a fulfilled promise of season 4, that Vecna is the mastermind. Each season, the big bad got bigger and badder until we got to Vecna, who was the origin. So going back and making the Mind Flayer the actual bad guy is a retcon. So it stays a creature from the Upside Down that Vecna tamed with his power. And I'm getting rid of the wormhole concept. It's cool for another story, but completely breaks the promises made and kept in the show so far. It is the Shadow Realm, that's enough. When you deal with fantasy, it's easy to fall into the trap of explaining too much. Smoke bellows from the Upside Down and possesses the captured people, crushing them to mush and creating a new Mind Flayer, who, remember, needed flesh from the real world to have a body, as it did not have a body where it was from, the Upside Down. Along with this smoke comes bats who spread out and search for the party while Vecna helps assembling his pet. Once the sun is blotted out and Hawkins now looks like Twilight between Upside Down and Hawkins, another figure of billowing smoke appears and hovers amidst the flock of bats. For each episode, I'm just going to hit the main beats for this video just to keep it concise so it doesn't become an hour video. Okay, so episode 2. The party's on the run from the bats, and they're intercepted by the misty figure in the library. They try to fight the smoke, but their attacks phase right through it, and it's unaffected by Elle's powers. Its army of bats injures the party severely, and when it throws Dustin against the wall, it breaks the water fountain. The splash of water strikes the smoke figure right as it's about to attack Dustin, and the water consolidates the mist into a physical form somewhat. It shrieks in pain and flees, taking the bats with it, and Dustin is left in shock, but nobody else saw what he saw. The party gets back together to patch up and come up with a plan, realizing they can't beat Vecna with the Bat Army as a shield. So Dustin, because of what he thinks he saw, offers an idea to try to control the bats against Vecna to help them. But nobody thinks it's a good idea, and decides to move on against all Dustin's pleadings. They start moving out so that they're not there when the bats return, and Dustin breaks down and admits what he thinks he saw, that it looked like Eddie. They think he's crazy because he's upset and misses him, so they understand, but they still decide to go against the plan. However, Steve convinces everyone to trust Dustin and fight for him. I like how in the show, there is some level of strife between Dustin and Steve. I think that makes sense, so I'm going to keep it as well. But Steve supporting Dustin at this point in my version will be a moment
to make the team do what Dustin thinks is right, because the party knows they're not talking. So the fact that he's supporting Dustin means it's serious.
In the meantime, the adult party are fighting the Mind Flayer, and it's tragic. If you want, I'll go into detail of the adult party in another video. But for this, I'm just focusing on the main party because I think that's what everybody cares about the most. They do their typical Stranger Things party planning, and like every scene before that introduced a new villain, they speak about this new mist monster controlling the bats in D&D terms. It is Cass, the vampire general at the right hand of Vecna. They point out that he didn't appear until the sun was blotted out, and that the water splashing on him is what made him flee, so they brainstorm what else affects vampires in D&D. Steve excitedly mentions a cross, and he knows because of this movie he just saw, The Lost Boys, which he watched on a date and nobody cares, but they're impressed. The church is destroyed, and so they think of other stuff. They think of the mirrors, they think of silver, and Nancy says her mom has tons of silver jewelry at home, and there were tons of mirrors at the carnival when they were kids. The teen party then decides to go with Nancy to collect the silver, while the child party goes to figure out where the carnival equipment was stored, and they find it deconstructed in a shack by the grave. Episode 3, they finish setting up the grave with mirrors stacked in a circle when the teen party shows up, arms and hands filled with earrings, necklaces, and bracelets of silver. They send Lucas to go track the bat since he runs the fastest, and Max, who is still blind, because you cannot just throw away consequences that have already happened. Max and Lucas kiss, and he goes off to find the bats. The adults are beaten and in hiding from the Mind Flayer. It's bigger now than it was when they started attacking, but now they have no ammo left and they're bloody and tired. The party is sitting on gravestones in quiet pain when Lucas is heard screaming in the distance. He's running while bats are nipping at him and Cass is right on his tail. They all get up and move around the designated spot in the middle of all the mirrors, which are face down in the grass around Eddie's gravestone. When they fight, Elle, even though her powers can't affect Cass, she just focuses on the bats, trying to protect the party from them at least. Lucas runs through to lure Cass into the center, and the party pull up the mirrors right as Cass enters. It looks into the mirror, but there's nothing there. However, it's not affected by the mirrors the way they thought it would. Will realizes this and quickly runs to the gravesite's main building, turning the sprinklers on. Cass falls to the floor and solidifies enough that Elle's power is finally able to latch onto him. She pins him to the floor in front of Eddie's gravestone, and as Cass groans in pain, they place all the silver on his arms, on his neck, his chest, and he lashes at the party the best he can until the smoke begins evaporating like steam from his body. They call out to Eddie, trying to connect with him, and when the smoke finally disappears, a twisted, upside-down affected Eddie lays on the floor calmly. All the bats then pause and hover in a circle about them. Dustin picks up Eddie's torso and hugs him, who's still wearing the same clothes with the same injuries from when he died, but they're old and ragged now. He comes to and he's out of it, but he's more serious than before, as though he's lost some of that innocence that he had. He's far more stoic from all the trauma he's had, almost Billy-like, but still happy to see everybody. We zoom out on the party standing around Eddie by his gravestone. Now, something I want to mention really quick before I continue is that it's okay for the fans to guess your ending. Postmodernism tells us that the unexpected is peak, that it's the thing by which you create proper storytelling. This is a falsehood. Great storytelling is hard. Subverting expectations for its own sake is easy. If I'm writing about a dog who likes cars, not because he wants to chase them, but because he thinks they're beautiful, and all the other dogs don't understand him, and it's a story of being yourself, and then all of a sudden at the end I make the dog a chef who cooks cat food for stray cats.
I subverted expectations, but it sucks. You don't care about that. You want to know about the dog that thought cars were beautiful and what happened to him. And it blows my mind that this is not only accepted but lauded. It's destroying our entertainment industry. Absolutely destroying it. I mean, just off the top of my head, The Last Jedi, which kind of kickstarted all of it. You got Joker 2. You've got Doctor Strange 2. You got Game of Thrones Season 8. Are you kidding me? They all subvert expectations, and they're all hated by the diehard fans. Fans predicting the ending is not bad. It means you've made promises so well, and you fulfilled those promises so well, that your fans understand your art. Is that not what all artists claim to desire most? Why throw all of that away just for the sake of subversion? It is the antithesis of artistry.
The trick is, okay, you guessed the ending and you're right, but watch how I get there. Oh, you guessed how I got there?
Then as a reward for being such a big fan, your idea of what you thought would be best, you get to watch it on screen actually play out and feel the joy that comes along with that, being able to know what's going to happen. It's one of the best feelings ever when you call something and then it happens, especially with something that you love. It doesn't stop all the original Star Wars fans rewatching their favorite movies, or the Lord of the Rings fans, or the Harry Potter fans, or the Marvel fans. Predicting what's coming is not a problem. It's part of the joy of experiencing a story.
So yes, everyone guessed that Eddie was Cass. Why?
Because we understand the art.
And know that it's the best choice for the character. Now, you all know how I'm going to end Vecna, but now watch how I do it. You know it, but it will still be satisfying because it'll be good writing. You know what good writing is. I'm not going to subvert because I don't want you to know what I'm doing. So, episode 4. With Eddie all caught up, he puts silver earrings in to make sure he can't transform back into the mist, but he's still in control of the bats. They discuss how they're going to take Vecna out. They want to get the Mind Flayer out first, but Cass says no. There's too much life that any amount of burned or killed parts of the Mind Flayer will be recovered tenfold. So they ask what Vecna's plans are, and Cass explains he wants to create an Earth where there's no free will. Cass explains that free will allows for evil, so to stop evil, you need to stop free will. Collecting everyone into the hive mind would allow him to force everyone to do good. The party questions the deaths he caused, and Cass answers that Vecna believes it's good for a few to suffer and the world be saved. They ask how to beat him, and Cass says they're not going to like it. Then we cut to the adult party, who have figured out they can't stop the Mind Flayer, and so they've pivoted, and they're just making sure people don't get abducted, or making sure they're fleeing in the proper direction, all while trying to avoid the Mind Flayer's attacks.
And figure out what their kids are doing so that they can go and help the kids.
The army arrives, and it's full-out war, but they've just added more flesh for the Mind Flayer to absorb. Vecna hovers above the town, observing his work, and Eddie uses the bats to provide camouflage around each member of the party, and together they fly up to meet Vecna. As the party approaches, Vecna spears one of the clouds of bats, and the bats all fly and retract away, revealing that there's nothing there. He snarls and begins spearing as many of the clouds of bats as he can. Decoy after decoy, he gets more and more flustered until one fleshy spear strikes a cloud. The bats fly away, and we find Jonathan with a hole in his chest. Vecna smirks, and in full anger and tired of doing this, he uses his power to shut down all the bats. All of our heroes are exposed and are immediately held up in the air to die. Their heads snap back, their eyes start to bleed, and then in a sudden, they fall to the floor. Some of them break their legs on the landing, but when we go back to Vecna, we see Eddie batted out, biting Vecna's neck tentacle and ripping it off as Vecna turns to fully kill Eddie. In his weakened stupor, Vecna flees to the Upside Down. Everyone tries to go check on Eddie, but Eddie yells at them to go after Vecna because he only gave them one chance and they're wasting it. In the Upside Down, Vecna jacks into his fleshy, charging tentacles and his wounds begin repairing, but he's still bleeding profusely from his neck. The party appears right as Vecna fully heals, and he unclips from the wall and lands more gargantuan and bulky than ever, with Demogorgon legs, an elongated snout for smelling, increased ears for healing, since his eyes just can't regenerate, looking very werewolf-like. He slashes at Nancy, slicing her gun to pieces, and then starts climbing on the walls like a spider as tendrils from his back shoot out towards the party. Mike gets a tendril right through his shoulder as he's preparing to throw a Molotov cocktail, and it crashes at his feet and ignites. 11 has to launch him across the room to protect him from it, and Will throws a spear at Vecna, but he jumps off the wall and begins walking towards them menacingly, shouting about how free will has caused their pain, not him. He's just a messenger. The party responds, saying that messengers don't murder their recipients. And Vecna says he's a messenger of experience, because no one cares about theft unless they've been robbed. No one cares about peace unless they felt conflict. Nobody cares about truth unless they've been lied to. And no one cares about a child getting lost in the woods until it's their own. He says that he is a messenger, and he brings experience. That humanity might find an out from evil of the world through him. Everyone, except naturally the people that broke their legs in Hawkins, stand between Ella and Vecna begins tossing to the side with surprising speed as Elle tries to protect everybody from him. But he's too strong. He's been doing this for far longer. Everyone gets kicked to the side, and he grabs Elle and picks her up, choking her out.
While tentacles from his other hand start piercing her skin. Because he is insane, he is bad, and his ideas are bad. And so we need to show that he's bad by showing the fact that he actually does take pleasure in seeing people that bother him experience pain.
All of a sudden, his face muscles relax, and he drops Elle. She gasps for air and looks up to see an axe head
protruding out of Vecna's head and Hopper holding its handle. She extends her arm and the axe violently shoots down to the floor, being ripped out of Hopper's hand. Vecna is split in half, and each end has little tentacles wriggling, trying to reconnect to the other half. A really bassy, thick sound is heard, and the party all see that in the distance, the portal's closing. Hopper picks Elle up, saying he's always going to be there to help her out because she's his daughter, but she's feeling very, very weak. So they get everybody up and desperately try and reach the portal. They get through right as it closes, naturally, because you have to. I'm sorry. It's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason.
I just wouldn't make it obnoxious.
And then they all collapse on the ground in Hawkins proper. The Mind Flayer falls in the distance, and the Demogorgons all fall as well, and the sky slowly begins to open up to light once more, and it's twilight. Tears of exhaustion and relief begin swelling up in everybody's eyes, but as they get up and start hugging, Elle can't get up, and then she passes out. Time jump to a few months later, we find out that as Vecna died, since he was the source of power, all power connected to him also died, meaning that Elle loses her powers. The government then doesn't care about her anymore and left her alone, but the whole party had to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and they all graduate together and end like the show did, playing D&D one final time before they go off to continue their lives on their own, but knowing they'll always have a home in the Wheeler basement. Because Elle is more than her powers, and the whole show is about her being seen and accepted by the party and finding a place to be welcome and safe. Thank you for staying this long. I know probably wasn't the most entertaining thing, but I had to get the idea out there because the ending just bothered me to no end. And this took me like 10 minutes. How many years did it take them to get season 5 out? Come on. It's ridiculous. There's no excuse, honestly. It honestly comes across like they were ready to be done, and so they just put it all together as best they could just to say, okay, we're done finally, so that they can move on to something else, which is lazy, but it is what it is.
And again, I don't buy the idea that because they're the ones that wrote it means that ending is the proper ending. Just because you wrote something doesn't mean you're correct with how you write it. And I know to non-artists that seems backwards. But when you create something, it takes a life of its own, and you have to respect its life. You can't force your own will into it. Otherwise, when it comes to your artistic integrity, you are a liar. And I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And so it's a shame that that's how they decided to end it, because they decided effectively to throw away their artistic integrity with one of the greatest shows ever written and make an ending that is so antithetical to what the story was about for 4 seasons that now there's no impulse to ever want to rewatch this ever again. It's literally the second coming of Game of Thrones. It's so disappointing. And I know for certain I'm not alone in that. But anyway, now I'm rambling. Thank you for listening if you've made it this far. Take care.